Sarah C. Bedford of the Washington Examiner got up early for me today. Good morning, Sarah. Thank you for doing this, but we really need an update on this CR. You cover the House. What is going on here? We got about 5 minutes. Just take the floor and tell us what's going on.
Well, it's been a bit of a mess this week on something that on paper should have been a pretty easy messaging win for Republicans. House Speaker Mike Johnson wanted to attach a measure called the SAVE Act to a 6-month stopgap spending bill that would last through March. And the SAVE Act would just strengthen protections against illegal immigrants voting in elections, which is a growing concern right now. That bill had passed the House as a standalone before, with even 5 Democrats joining it. So it seemed like a no brainer. But you have defense hawks, who are the most public voices of opposition here, who are coming out and saying, we don't want to fund the Pentagon at a sort of flat rate for 6 months. They want these defense hawks on the Republican side kind of agree with Democrats that there should be just a 3-month continuing resolution that expires in December. So you have some discomfort with both the SAVE Act portion of the CR and the length of time that Johnson proposed. So on Wednesday, as the House was getting ready to go ahead and vote on this, Johnson, realizing the votes just weren't there, pulled the measure. And I think right now, a lot of the anxiety is over the fact there doesn't seem to be a compelling plan B now that that CR has been pulled.
Now, I've read that there doesn't seem to be a plan B. Is that just Mike Johnson being good at this again? Because he turned out to be a very effective speaker. And do you think he's just knitting together the coalition?
Well, I think a private plan B that was sort of floating around was potentially breaking off the SAVE Act piece from the CR and still keeping that 6-month timeline. So, in other words, using the SAVE Act as leverage to extend the CR into March. And what that would do is prevent this Congress, which has this very thinly divided House and this Democratic Senate, from locking in a potential Trump presidency to a year of funding for things that Trump doesn't support, like more funding for Ukraine and a bigger federal budget. So that's what Republicans were trying to avoid with a 6-month CR, which would give the new Congress and very likely a Republican controlled Senate the opportunity to do a longer term funding bill. So that was a sort of plan B that had been floating around the House. I'm not sure that Johnson anticipated the level of opposition from those centrist defense hawk Republicans in his conference, like Mike Rogers, who are saying that they don't support the 6-month timeline, regardless of what happens with the SAVE Act.
Well, I'm with Rogers and Ken Calvert. People don't know what CRs do to the Pentagon. They're terrible, aren't they, Sarah? They're just awful on the Pentagon.
They can be. That's certainly the defense hawks argument that the Pentagon can't function if you just hold its funding flat for that period of time. They just want to get to the omnibus spending bill as quickly as possible. That would be in December under the timeline that Schumer and also these centrist Republicans want. But again, that's kicking the can to after the election, which could be a very contentious time, and locking in a Trump presidency to funding that he doesn't want. So there are other Republicans who are really serious about getting a 6-month CR.
I'm going to talk with Dan Sullivan. The Senate will not pass this. The Hawks in the Senate and the Hawks, I call them just realists. They're not going to pass this. It's bad for the country's defense. So, Sarah, possible government shutdown, when does it start?
Well, the government shutdown would start in October 1st, but I don't think that a government shutdown is on the horizon. Problem for Johnson is it'll look like a massive cave if he just goes ahead with a clean 3-month CR without the SAVE Act after making so much noise about this being a really important
Uh,
messaging bill for Republicans. But again, he has these also who they've been less vocal in this fight, but certainly a factor. The conservatives who, someone used the term with me, McCarthy derangement syndrome this week. There are a handful of conservatives who are going to try to take essentially any deal that Johnson strikes with Democrats, but a 3-month CR without the SAVE Act would be a tough pill to swallow for those conservatives.